Welcome to Esoteric Thoughts. As part of exploring the origins of biblical stories, we will look at the story of Joseph in Egypt with Potiphar's wife, and where this story was potentially influenced from. In Genesis 39, Joseph is working for the Egyptian official Potiphar. Potiphar's wife took a liking to him and tried to seduce him, but Joseph thought it wrong and a betrayal of his master. He continued to avoid her advances, even when she removed her clothing. When he left her room, he left his clothing in her hand. She panicked at the thought that someone might find her with his garment in her possession. Witnesses were apparently about to enter the room, and she cried, "Rape." Potiphar, faced with the dilemma of either calling his flirtatious wife a liar or having to punish his innocent servant, sided with his wife and jailed Joseph. The story of a young hero rejecting the advances of a jealous woman was a frequent theme in ancient myths. One of the most famous versions, the tale of the two brothers. The story's origins may go back as far as the 3rd millennium. The Egyptian text on what is now known as the Albany Papyrus from around 1225 BC tells of two brothers, Anubis, the older one, and Bata, the younger. The younger lived with his brother and his brother's wife. One day, Anubis's wife came upon him and confessed her desire for carnal knowledge. He rejected her advances, saying she and his brother were like parents to him. He promised to say nothing of her actions. The wife, afraid of being found out, arranged to look as if she had been assaulted and accused her brother-in-law of the act. Despite Bata's denial, Anubis became enraged, and the younger brother left the household. In the course of the story, Bata acquired a beautiful wife as a gift of the gods, but she wound up abandoning him for a position as the pharaoh's concubine. On several occasions, the younger brother took on new life forms, and his estranged wife arranged for each of Bata's new physical forms to be destroyed. Eventually, the king learned of the young man's accomplishments and made him crown prince of Egypt. Older mythological variations of the biblical story were widespread in Egypt and the Near East. Biblical scribes reworked the tale and inserted it into the Genesis story of Joseph. In both stories, the mention of the wife by name is absent. Both heroes work performing household chores. In the Egyptian tale, the woman speaks to Bata, similar to how the Egyptian woman speaks to Joseph in Genesis 39, where she tries to grab him. She got up, took hold of him, and said to him, "Come, let us sleep together." Both contain the motive of the clothes. Although they were used differently, the clothes was used as evidence. Joseph delivers a similar speech as Bata, qualifying the woman's proposal as "this great wrong that you have said to me." And like the woman of Genesis 39, the woman in the tale of the two brothers perverts the events in the presence of her husband. Joseph and Bata are long-suffering heroes. In contrast to Genesis 39, the tale of the two brothers is a complicated and long mythological text, which legitimates Bata eventually as the pharaoh after enduring a lot of trials. The author of Genesis 39 has only taken over the first part of the tale, though it can be argued that the Joseph story is also about Joseph's ascent to power after serving many years in prison until he interpreted Pharaoh's dream and was appointed vizier of Egypt. Both marry wives with religious connections. In the case of Joseph, he married the priest of the sun god's daughter. The heroes eventually rise to considerable prominence in Egypt. Bata to Pharaoh of Egypt, and Joseph to crown prince of Egypt. The biblical story talks about humans and human behavior and the actions of a monotheistic God. The tale of two brothers relates the actions of polytheistic gods living on earth like humans. The Egyptian story, however, is more deeply immersed in polytheistic life-death symbolism than the biblical tale. The biblical account purges the polytheistic mysticism but retains much of the basic structure, substituting alternative problems for the life-death-rebirth sequences. From a false accusation of rape to marrying a wife with religious connections, through several tests and trials and finally becoming Crown Prince of Egypt, the Egyptian and biblical stories follow the same general plotline. Scholars with Egyptological training have long recognized the Egyptian elements in the Joseph story. Alan Schulman claims the writer of the biblical version had an exceedingly intimate knowledge of Egyptian life, literature, and culture, particularly in respects of the Egyptian court, and in fact may even have lived in Egypt for a time. The obvious question here is, how do we know which story came first? The biggest clue is in the names of the characters in the biblical version, namely Joseph, Potiphar, Ashnath, Potiphar, and Zaphanath-Paneah, which was Joseph's Egyptian name conferred upon him by Pharaoh in Genesis 41 verse 45. The linguistic and etymologies of the personal names in the Joseph story have provided a chronological snapshot of the account. If the data from the corpus of names converge on a specific time period, theoretically they can provide parameters for the date of authorship or the setting of the story. It is noteworthy that the final element of the priest's name, Potiphar, is Ra, the patron of On, or Heliopolis, where the sun god's most important center was situated. It is at this precise religious center the Potiphar is said to have been a priest in Genesis 41 verse 45. So knowing this helps to date the Genesis story. The Egyptian name for Potiphar is used sporadically prior to the 10th century BC and doesn't come into general use until at least the 7th century. A story having two such characters with that name, both in important positions, indicates a very late authorship, 7th century or possibly later, way after the Egyptian tale. Please look forward to more Old and New Testament comparative stories in the Origin series on this channel. Thank you.